We are storytellers by nature, sharing with others what we experience, perceive, and believe of life, our joys, adventures, our losses. We tell ourselves stories as well. Some leave us trapped by false beliefs and self-doubt. But there are also stories of persisting, exploring, and rising above. Stories of uncovering the truth, enabling powerful transformation and triumph. These are those stories. These are your stories. Hello, folks. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me get this banner up here. There we go. My name is Zoe DeMuro. I am the host of this wonderful show, and I know it's wonderful because of all of the people I've been able to bring here. The show is called And So It Is, Stories of Truth, Transformation, and Triumph. I'm a religious science practitioner with the New Thought Media Network, and I'm also a transformational coach. My ministry and my mission are to help people to co-create their most authentic and most fulfilling life experience. So I am honored and excited because I get to bring this show to you the first Saturday of each month, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Pacific. And if you're tuning in for the first time, wonderful. Great to have you here. If you're returning, welcome back. Each episode of this show looks at how people like you, people like me, who have been held back by false and limiting beliefs, have uncovered their truth, enabling them to truly transform their life experience, leading to actual triumph, not in spite of their journey, but because of their journey. Which brings me to today's guest, Sabrina Bolus. Let me tell you just a little bit about Sabrina. Currently, Sabrina is the adult program manager at the LightHouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired in San Francisco, California. She holds a master's in theology from the San Francisco Theological Seminary. She's a chaplain with more than 20 years of experience in personal development, recovery, cultural engagement. And I am honored to call her my friend. And, given that we're both from New York City, Brooklyn, as a matter of fact, I think of her as my sister from another mister. You know what I'm saying? Welcome to the show, Sabrina.
Hi, so thank you. Brooklyn in the house.
Indeed.
Yes. It's so good to be here.
All right. So the way we always start the show is give me an idea of where you want to start your story. Where and when in your life are we?
We are in 2019. And in 2019, I was one day getting dressed for work, and I was in my mirror preparing, and my phone rang, and it was my brother. And the first words that came out of his mouth were, I just want you to stay calm.
Always a great beginning.
Always a great beginning. And so I just froze and listened. And what followed was just changed who I was. And I didn't know that at the time. And the next words that came out of his mouth were, he was in New York, I was in Oakland, California, and he said, we had a blackout last night. My mother at the time was on oxygen, so they thought they would take her to the hospital so that if anything went wrong, she would be at a place where she can be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so they took her to the hospital, and as soon as she arrived, she lost consciousness. And this is the next day that he's calling me, and she was still unconscious. And he said, I'm going to put the phone to her ear and you can talk to her. And he put the phone to her ear, and all I could say was, Mommy, wait for me. I'm coming. Wait for me. And that was all that could come out. And I of course, told her I love her, but that was all I can say over and over. And he pulled the phone back and he said that she moved. She moved, her body moved.
Hmm.
And so for the next hours in the blur of it all, I'm making arrangements to go home. And I was able to get a flight that night. And I arrived early the next morning. My father picked me up from the airport and he said to me, "Hey, let's go to breakfast." I'm like, "Breakfast? I'm going to, what are you talking about? I'm going to the hospital. I want to see mommy." He said, "Oh, she's awake." And I was like, "Oh, that's fantastic. We're going to the hospital." And I went to the hospital, and there she was surrounded by family and friends. And I walk in, and she goes, "Oh, hello." And she's sitting up in this hospital bed, and I'm just looking at her. And so we spent the day with family and friends and talking. And then around 6 p.m., she just was like, "Okay, everybody go home." She just switch. This pleasant, wonderful, laughing person was just all of a sudden out, loud, angry, and people just froze. We ushered everyone out, and I said, "Mom, I'm going to stay here the night." And I stayed with her, and then through the night, um, she kept losing consciousness again and kept trying to take the oxygen off of her face. And all I knew to do was to just crawl in bed with her and start praying the Our Father. We grew up Catholic, praying the
Hmm.
Our Father and the Hail Mary. And even though her, she wasn't able to really use words when she was going in and out of consciousness, she was able to recite the Our Father with me.
Hmm.
And then, she passed that night. She passed in my arms, and that was probably, without a doubt, not probably, the worst day of my life. That's where this all started.
Hmm. Well, I do have to say that I am so glad, though, that you were able to be there and speak with her and have her hear you and to hold her.
Yes, yes, and that's where I was able to start a process of gratitude and grief. And I didn't understand at the time that that's what it was. I had just lost my mom. But when I came back to work, um, my boss at the time, I was working in recovery, and my boss at the time wanted me to continue with the work, which this happened in July and November, get ready for a gratitude retreat that we would do with our clients at a retreat called San Damiano out here in California. And I didn't want to do it because at that time, I wasn't really getting out of bed. I was pretty much, very much devastated. So I, in coming up with what am I going to be grateful for this year, because every year we did the retreat around gratitude. There was no moving, putting the grief aside. There was only using it. And I had to use it because I had to figure out how could I find gratitude in grief. And I got to replay that day. I got to replay that day with an understanding that, from the moment I got that call and the fear of losing my mother and then having her again and thinking that, all right, we now still have a lifetime ahead of us, and then realizing that, she was gone, and then just crying every morning, not being able to get out of bed. What I was able to take away was I got that one last day that people asked for. All the way in California, she waited for me. She waited for me. And then there she was sitting up and giving us that one last day to be with her and to be able to be part of her passing. Just for me was biblical. To be at the side of her bed when her spirit left her body was the most precious gift that I could have been given. at that time. And the pain that I was feeling came from the fact that I was so deeply loved by this woman. That this woman loved me to the point of there is this big, huge, gaping hole. And I was grateful for that because without that love, I, I, I wouldn't have, I would not be who I am. I would not know how to love. I would not know what love meant. And to be honest with you, until I lost that love, I didn't know how special love
Mm.
was. And so gratitude became something very important for me. It became a very important piece of my life. And moving through all of the beliefs that I had, especially when I was at this retreat, because I was still, even while I was speaking at that time, I was still in a lot of pain and not understanding until I was saying the words that I was very grateful at that
Mm.
moment for the love. And it wasn't until after I shared the story and one of the attendees later went to the gift stop and came back and gave me a little keychain with an angel and said, "Okay, now you're my angel. Can I tell you a story?" And the story she told was she was an army medic and she was in Afghanistan, I believe it was, and one of her best friends was with her, and at that point died in her arms. And from that moment up until this retreat, she was feeling very guilty that as a medic she couldn't save her.
Mm.
And at this particular point, after the retreat, she realized that her role was for her friend to be held by her in love as she passed on. And
Mhm.
the gift that she gave me with that share really intensified my understanding of gratitude and grief because I can have my story and know it, but to hear other people's stories and how it made me even look deeper into what I was experiencing and where I wanted to grow.
Mhm. You had mentioned that there were beliefs that you held prior to this that were kind of holding you back. What were those beliefs?
Yeah, the beliefs that I held was I experienced a lot of depression and anxiety, and I believed that there was a movie. Is this is as good as it gets with Jack Nicholas, I believe it was, and I believe that I had done 5 years of therapy, and I believed that this is as good as it gets. That the
Mm.
depression is always going to be there, the
Mhm.
anxiety is always going to be there, and this big, big, big moment is going to break me because my rock is now no longer on this earth. So I really believe that this was my end as well. And I was just going through the motions until I actually started having to do the work on gratitude and grief.
Mhm. So it was interesting that this this whole part of your transformation, the thing that started to trigger your transformation, came from this request or this requirement to do this uh, particular program. And it's when you were speaking about being able to hear other people's stories and how you can relate and how you can recognize and see yourself in their stories as well.
Yeah.
It's all about this interconnection.
Yes.
And
Yes. Y- Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a huge part of the what I didn't know before. And it shows up in, I guess, now the work that I do. Because most of my work is listening to other people's stories or having people tell their stories in different ways. And maybe it's probably because of this,
Hmm.
through where, and the gift of it also is it keeps on giving. Like even just this exchange right now, it's like that makes sense why I do the work that I do. you know, and I love that because we keep using the word journey and some people say it's overused, but it is something that just keeps unfolding. And that's the beauty that I love of the spiritual journey. It just keeps unfolding for me. And so discovering the interconnectedness, when you say that to me now, I'm going, oh, yeah, oh, sure. But back then, I would have just been like, okay, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right? Even though it was all happening, I
Hmm.
couldn't at that time see what was happening.
Hmm.
And I love it.
So you go into this program to do to speak about grief, gratitude, to explore gratitude. Did it instantaneously make sense to you? Were you fighting it? Did you have to work your way through it? How did that go?
No, it didn't. It definitely did not instantaneously make sense to me. By the time I got there, first of all, I fought it all the way up into the morning I gave my presentation. I just I really did. I kept looking for all ways to get out of it. I was even telling my boss the morning of, why don't you just take this? I really don't feel up to it. And the next thing I know, I found myself sitting in front of all of these people, just telling the story. And it was still very raw, very emotional. I cried through it. I felt every piece of it.
Hmm.
And you could hear a pin drop. It was just so quiet in that room. And I, 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 by the time I was done, I wasn't even sure what I said. That's how,
Hmm.
that's where I was. And then people told me what I said, and it was the story, and it was the story. It was, the moments of just being with mother at that time. It was, even sitting on the plane. It was the whole story of what it all felt like. And when I was done, I was relieved that it was over, but I was still grieving. I was still grieving. Mom was still gone.
Hmm.
And I wasn't in acceptance yet. I still wanted my mother there. I still want her there, but I wasn't in acceptance where I was letting go of the fact that without her, I can go on. I was still trying to figure out how can I go on without her
Hmm.
was the question. So it was a struggle all the way, and it was a struggle for months to come at least. And definitely, I can say the grief itself started lifting over years. And it wasn't up until last year where I felt, okay, I'm really at a place where I'm in acceptance. Yeah.
Yeah, grief is certainly not an event. It
Mm-mm.
is very much a process.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not linear. That was something that I learned
Hmm.
very strong. It's not linear.
Yeah,
So,
talk about that.
well, I c- there are days that I just stop and just cry and miss her,
Hmm.
because and I'm back to, why do you have to leave, mom? Back to the denial, the, uh, there's never negotiating, but, and then I don't go back there as much, but I get to move into acceptance again and look at a changed perspective of, I'm so grateful I was loved by you. And And then I have days where I put the blanket over it. I'm like, "Mommy," and I'm crying for my mother like a little 2-year-old. And all of those through the transformation, and I'll talk a little bit about where that came. All of those moments let me feel her still.
Mm.
And so where that once was, "Oh, that's too much pain, I don't wanna feel it," I can still remember the tears in the shower just pouring over my head and just leaning my head against the wall and just crying and just crying and crying and crying. Um, and those moments are now gifts. They're now times of, "Oh, thanks, mom, I feel the love. I
Hmm.
feel the love." And so yeah, so it's not linear. And what I will say over the years, it's different. It's different. It's not looking at the pain. When my mother, when she died, what really started to change for me once the clouds started lifting and I started spending more time in grief and in gratitude for with the grief, I have to say was actually when I started coming to New Thought.
Mm.
And I was actually looking for a spiritual weight loss class because I wanted to do everything spiritual. I'm still practicing Catholicism. I wanted to do everything spiritual because after mom's death, especially, I just wanted God, just wanted love, and so I found a spiritual weight loss class online. It was through um, a spiritual center out here in Oakland, and I started going to that class and they were saying things that made sense for what I was going through because I was
Mhm.
still very deep in grief. And learning about self-love and all those things. I had spent 7 years in recovery for adult children of alcoholics, and that was the work I was doing at the time. And so I already knew things about self-love and the inner child and all of, going from, circumstance to solutions. And I knew that, but this was now becoming very internal,
Mhm. Mhm.
very, very internal. So it was more than just a spoken word or words on a page. And that's where things started for me. But now I started finding people who were using language and doing it in everyday life. So it was no longer just words on a page. It was, I think you've heard me use this term before, applied spirituality. Like whatever we were reading or learning, we were actually living and doing and using in our everyday life. And then I came to New Thought and everything, everything that rip curtain, which comes from, I believe it's the book of Revelations, where after Christ's crucifixion and the curtain ripped and it was done, what opened up for me was I am loved still. I'm not alone on this earth. I am so greatly loved. And that feeling of love for my mother is the feeling that got to understand spirit a little more. I got to understand, um, and then and it was actually Michael Beckwith, his visioning process,
Mhm.
that where he's very very adamant about creating a feeling sense, a feeling tone of unconditional love. And I was like, how do I do that? How do I do that? Right? My love just left this earth because, I never had children. So I didn't learn that kind of love. So it's like my love has just left this earth. How do I do that? And then I just started remembering things about mother's love. I started remembering that when I would come home, and this might be a regional reference, but when I would come home from California, there would be a pyramid stack of White Castle cheeseburgers on the table. Regional reference. Look it up, folks, if you haven't had a White Castle. And I walk in the door and just start cracking up, and then it would just be like the Chinese food from the neighborhood Chinese place, the pizza place from Original Pizza, and it was food and love, and mom always made it fun. And so when I think of that love and the exuberance that I feel, and then Michael Beck would say, take a deep breath, hold it in, snap, and multiply it by 50 times. And I started learning how to do that. And I'm like, oh, that's what spirit feels like. That's what spirit feels like. So understanding the feeling tone was probably one of the first things that really helped me understand alignment.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting that you started with a spiritual weight loss program. Excuse me. Even though we're talking about physical weight loss,
Hmm.
you were losing other
Ah,
types of weight, what you've
yes,
been carrying around for a long time.
yes. Yes, you are absolutely right. I was shedding fear. I was shedding shame. I was shedding depression. I was shedding anxiety. All of these things that I learned later were very much blocking that alignment with spirit, blocking that joyful feeling, and coming to new thought and listening to um, even working with Yuzo, for all that time during the pandemic. The pandemic was really, really tough for us, and I was still very much in my grief. The pandemic happened, what, a year or two later. I
Mhm,
was very much in my grief. Everything was shutting down. Actually, it was the year after. So
mhm,
it started in March, and mom had passed in the July prior, and you held space weekly for this feeling, and then being able to study Ernest Holmes with you and trying to understand, what are you saying, Ernest? What are you saying? Why so many words, Ernest? Why so many words? But that's the work. That's the work. And then all of a sudden, I started understanding and reading the Bible
mhm,
in a very different way,
mhm,
not in a
mhm,
very rote way, but in a very personal way. And all of that really started helping me release all of those things, all of those blocks. And again, and listening to Reverend Michael, of course, saying during that whole visioning thing, I wasn't trying to gain something. I was trying to release
mhm,
what you were saying. So
mhm,
yes, the spiritual weight loss was more than weight on the physical body. It was probably the best thing I let go of were my addictions to fear, to
mhm,
shame, to doubt, to anxiety. And I say it that way because I treated them like addictions. Those were feelings of um, that I was comfortable with and understood.
mhm,
So I would hold on to those, and the love and the forgiveness and the joy, those were more foreign to me and harder for me to feel comfortable with.
Mm,
And all of these things that were happening because my mother was very joyful, always laughing, always giggling. And I used to say to her, "Gosh, do you ever get depressed? Don't you ever get depressed?" Like I would get frustrated, like how come you don't get to be depressed and I have to be depressed, But I think she knew something deeper um, in the joy.
mm. Yeah, being able to see the transition from knowledge to feeling, right?
Yes,
What we call that deep knowing.
yes.
That is so much power in that. Um, before we go on to talking about how this actually did change your life, let's take a short break here.
Okay,
Okay, we'll be right back, folks.
thank you.
And we are back. So, folks, we are talking with Sabrina Bolus today about her story of truth, transformation, and triumph. And I just wanted to point out that we have some comments um, from your doula for grief, Bonnie Gonzalez, magnificent practitioner. And
Yes.
Bonnie has pointed out, that you're being able to have that last moment with your mother, how powerful and how glorious that was,
Yes.
what a gift it was. And she says that grief is powerfully transformative in a loving way
Mm,
because
yeah.
grief's superpower is healing.
Superpower. I love that. Thank you,
Matter of
Bonnie.
fact, let me put that up on the screen.
Yes. I love
Bonnie.
that. Thank you, Bonnie.
All right. So that's a perfect lead in to where we're going to go next. All right. So you have moved away from this idea that you can't possibly live beyond this experience of losing what you refer to as your rock,
Mm.
uh, and not knowing if you would ever be able to get past that grief. And now you have found a way. So, how did that actually bring about a transformation for you? What happened?
What happened was I got out of bed.
Always a good start.
I got out of bed. It was one step at a time. But I started, look, this woman was the genius in my life. She, I looked at her story. Her story was at 3 years old. She was chased out of Alabama by the KKK, came to New York with like a family of 13 and had all the traumas that we have as African Americans, and she married my dad. And later in life, after I graduated from high school, she went back to school and she was a nurse and got her master's in public health. And then she became the first. She was also part of the nurses who went to Congress and got the nurse practitioner bill passed. And she became the first nurse to sit on the New York City Board of Directors, Health and Hospital Corporation. And she was so proud, and I was so proud of her. And I look and I realize I'm her legacy.
Mm.
My brother is her legacy. You know, do I stop now? Or, and I just kept, feeling that that moment that I was with her when she passed, I was the one who received this beautiful gift. And I got out of bed and I even had to start looking at what kind of work I wanted to do. And I knew
Mm.
that I wanted to stay in service. And at that point, my boss, who was the ED of the recovery program I was working at, he was retiring. So it was time for me to leave as well. And then I bought my first new car in 20 years, and it had like backup mirrors and everything, and all these cool buttons, and a beautiful blue color. And I'm driving my brand new car, and 6 months later, I learned you could no longer drive because your vision is changing. By the time I got that news, I already had in practice gratitude and grief. And so it actually propelled me to say, okay, I could deal with this. And I went to DOR and they sent me to the Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired for services. And I went there and I joined the employment immersion program. And now I work at the Lighthouse putting on programs for adults.
Mm.
And so the change for me is using all of these life experiences because what I really learned through New Thought, through all of this, was just part of a greater good, a greater picture. And so that was one of the big things that started happening for me is being able to look at life in terms of with mommy's passing, life is short. Like I realized life is very, very short. And so I started finding ways to find the kind of joy that she had in life.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite pieces is the Book of Joy and the Eight Pillars of Joy. And I tend to, when I have a problem now, I, as I learned in religious science, don't focus on the condition, but focus on the outcome of what I want, and so or what I need. And so I start running things through those pillars,
Mhm.
and starting with the change of perspective of the the loss was great love, and the fact that I had the great love and what we talked about. But losing my mother also reminded me, like I said, that how small I am in this mystery of life for myself, and focusing on these challenges in life rather than actually living life, because
Mhm.
life is so short, is my old thinking. That's the old way of thinking, the old baggage. And it's like watching my mother, no matter her challenge, go on to the next greatest thing was really I wish I could tell that's what I wish I could tell her sometimes. "Ma, you were right. You were right. I should wear less black, wear brighter colors, and I should focus on joy," you know? And so, but all of these things came, and then even in my grief, and the third pillar for the pillar was humor. Even in my grief, my mother's memories, I think of, like I said, the White Castles and things that just make me smile, and the way she always started a sentence. And so, and also, I learned to accept that this time on earth is really for living, and even in that grief, I want to keep doing that. And the gratitude for all that I have is a new way of looking at things instead of what I don't have. I don't have mom. I do have her love. I do have the memories. I do have her lessons. I do have my father and all of these people in my life.
Hmm.
And then the eighth pillar is generosity, and I look at that as our law of circulation, and just really just sharing all of this with other people through the programs that I get to produce.
Hmm. That's beautiful. So when I look at this, I see this constant factor of going from knowledge to feeling, knowledge to feeling, and it's probably one of the most important aspects of spirituality. The way I look at it, we think of uh, what is spirituality. Well, it's being alive,
Yeah,
it's being aware, it's being present,
yeah,
and grief does not necessarily need to take us out of any of that. As a matter of fact, it can be a very powerful way to get into those understandings and to allow those feelings to work through. Um, and you have done a wonderful job with that.
mhm.
Um, Talk a bit about the programs that you're doing at uh, the Lighthouse.
That's all I have.
I know you're bringing a lot of who you are to that organization.
Yes, and it's really interesting because I would not have planned this for myself because first of all, didn't know that my vision was going to change. So this was never the plan. Um, and when I got to the lighthouse, I didn't know really what to do because there were regular programs. People taught yoga, people taught art, these are the skills that I don't have. These are the things that I appreciate. And so I had to figure out what can I bring to the lighthouse based on my lived experiences. I actually did try to take a chair yoga training so that I can teach it. And I was like, oh, trying too hard, girl, and you're trying too hard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
namaste over there.
yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And so I had to go into my visioning. That's how I got really close with Michael Beckwith without even meeting him. I had to start doing some visioning and working and talking with a lot of our students. I realized that we all live these wonderful, great lives. And so we started putting programs together that actually not only reinforce their blindness skills, blindness training skills like orientation and mobility, learning how to use the cane and orientate yourself in your surroundings, your independent living skills, where people learn how to live independently again, getting dressed, showering, being able to cook, use the kitchen, things like that, as well as assistive technology, learning how to, without vision, being able to come on and watch your show, and using the cell phones and stuff. So that's at the core of it. And what I do is community services, which is the fun way of reinforcing all of these skills. So if we go out to a play, we're reinforcing O&M, and I go to a museum using my technology, for example, to read what's going on the
Mhm.
face. So those are things that reinforce it. But the other part, which is a big part, which is Toastmasters, where people are able to tell their stories.
Mm.
And then I have a program called In My Own Words, where folks come and tell different stories about the parts of their lives. I put together cultural events so people get to express themselves from who they really are, as opposed to who the world says that they are.
Hmm.
And I'm about to put on coordinate a retreat that's happening at the end of this month, for example, at our camp in Napa in the Enchanted Hills, where as we go through nature walks and other parts of the program, people are going to recite the poetry that they wrote in some of our classes. So storytelling has become a very big deal for the programs that I do. And some of the stories might be about grief. There was one story about a woman whose father was in an internment camp and how he wrote a letter to the Sacramento Bee on the day he was being taken there. These kind of stories, they help us ground not just what I do day to day, but where we come from and who we are, and that we are greater than these things that are happening in this world right now. And that these are the things that we look at and hold on to during troubled times. When the waters start getting troubled, I will think of that tower of White Castle to bring me back into alignment and remind me that there is a yes and the yes
Hmm.
and has been the greatest thing that I've learned in my work from working with people and hearing other people's stories. And it's also been the greatest thing that I can give people when I talk about my story.
A common theme in the things that I heard you speak of uh, is connection. Again, being able to be connected to your own life, being able to be connected with the world itself,
Yes.
yeah. And
Yeah.
identity, big part of
Yeah.
it, being able to see the truth of who you are, not to be held back by other people's interpretations and other people's biases.
Yes, yes. And that's really huge. And that was huge in both populations that I work with in the recovery, as well as in in when we're blind and visually impaired, because there's isolation
Mm.
that can happen in both of these things. And remember, a lot of this stuff came to the surface for me during the pandemic when the whole world shut down, where so many people became even more isolated,
Mhm.
and connection, as you said, is such a big thing, because connection is, it's even more than I'm sitting next to a person. Connection is knowing that I'm not alone. And not only am I not alone, I'm not alone in my thoughts. I'm not alone in my changing vision. I'm not alone in what's happening to me right now, and there are people around me who understand exactly what I'm going through with my vision. And then when I connect to them, even on a different level, whether it's culturally or whether it's even going to a play and enjoying the joy, I'm connecting on that level that just goes deeper, deeper. And if you know who I am and you still love me, you're my person. You're my person. So I get lots of persons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a quote, I can't remember who said it, but it's like, I don't get to choose what cards I'm dealt, but I do get to choose who I sit at the table with.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. Yes, it's true. Hmm.
So Bonnie has given us this remark. She said, sending love to you both for caring and sharing. Grief needs to be validated, shared, and heard. This is how we begin our path to moving forward and healing our grief.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Bonnie. Absolutely, absolutely. When it stays inside, that is when that 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 hurt me physically
Mm.
even more as it stays inside my body.
Mm-hmm.
and I don't release it. I mean, all of those stress hormones and
Mm-hmm.
all, just kept releasing into my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I could feel my body getting weaker and weaker. And being able to have places to express it. I went to grief groups right away because I learned through ACA that talking about it just makes the power of it less and less and less. And so just being able to have spaces to talk about these things actually is very healing, not just physically, not just emotionally, but also physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing that I have seen in story after story on this show, and certainly what I've experienced in my own life, is it's not about looking at what happened or what that circumstance was and denying it. It's not saying, okay, that's it. I'm not even going to look at that. It's quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. It's being able to understand what is in there for me, being able
Oh,
to go beyond that surface. And it makes
yeah.
such a huge difference.
It is, and you said something very important, which is being able to look and say, what is in there for me? What is in there for me? Because in every circumstance, if I look back and if I especially run it through those 8 pillars, I find what is in there for me. I find that one thing I learned in New Thought is everything is for my purpose.
Mm,
Everything is for my purpose. And one of my favorite Bible passages, and I know I share this with my friend Dorothy Mendez, is "Be still and know."
mm,
And when I'm able to just be still and ask that question, though, like that empowering question, the answers open up.
mhm,
And I learn that things like, yes, there is great love in loss and a great understanding in loss. Um, the grief is for me knowing what I love. It's knowing what I love. And the gratitude part is knowing that I'm still alive
mm.
and that it's time to keep living.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And there's gratitude in grief and in recognizing that there is love there.
yeah,
If there were no
yeah,
love, there would be no loss.
yes,
Um,
yeah.
there's a quote that I saw one time that I truly disagreed with. And maybe it's just a matter of how I'm interpreting the words, but I heard someone say that grief is um, not having a place for love to go. And I disagree.
Mm,
I think it's quite the opposite. I think grief is recognizing a place where, or perhaps getting to a place of understanding where love is now. Because
yeah.
the person might not physically be there, but the love is there.
Oh, the love is eternal. I've learned the love
Absolutely.
is eternal. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And I appreciate it more. I appreciate it more. I mean, and life still keeps lifing. I mean, my parents were married for 66 years, and so my dad lost his wife, and
Mm-hmm.
he's 91, and last year he had a terrible fall,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Yeah.
spent the whole year, last year especially, going back and forth to New York and being able to get him the support that he needs. And I never thought I could do something like that. Like I said, I've never been a parent. And having this level of responsibility, initially I was like, why me? Why me? Why not my brother? He's had kids. I don't know how to do this. But I'm the girl. So like I don't know how that figured into it, but it did. But this whole past year, I had to not stay focused on the condition and really stay focused on what needed to happen. And with all the stops and starts and getting home healthcare, around the clock home healthcare is not an easy feat, and especially doing it 3,000 miles away. And I really stayed focused on spirit. And there were days where I was like, this isn't going to work. But it was having to really change that as quickly as I can into what can come out of this really became it. That was born, that confidence, that drive was born out of what I learned from my mother's passing, that since I'm still standing, I could really do this.
Mhm.
And yeah, so grief, a big moment of grief was very transformative in me feeling confident about what I can handle, what I can take on, who I am. I
Hmm.
now understand who's and who. And that used to be kind of elusive. So,
Beautiful. All right. Before I give you one last word, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping here and say, folks, this is your show. All right. If you would like to come on and talk about your story, being able to talk about how you went from a limiting belief to how you were able to find the truth and transform, I would love to hear from you. You can send me an email here at zodimuro@gmail.com and let me know. There is no story too big or too small because triumph is triumph. So, um, by all means, let me know and please share this video. All right, share it on your social media, get people to go to YouTube to watch it, wherever. Let them know. First Saturday of every month, we're here sharing and celebrating. Celebrating. Okay, Sabrina, any last thoughts?
I would just really like to say what I've been able to discover is gratitude is probably one of the most important things um, that I have, and I see it as the doorway to to where my joy is. And I am able to look into my toolbox and at different times use different tools to get to that gratitude. Either it's through the visioning process or through the 8 pillars or through affirmative prayer, meditation, just using all the tools and cycling through them in different situations until I find that inner peace, that joy,
Hmm.
that feeling of love, unconditional love. Um, and it always begins with gratitude for me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I am incredibly grateful to you.
Thank you so much. So, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. And thank you, Bonnie.
Okay. All right, folks. We'll see you soon. Be well. And know that you are loved. Oh, and you are love itself. Namaste.
Namaste.